Well, I am so freaking excited because my friend Theresa is here today. She is a team building and digital marketing coach for online entrepreneurs, and she helps CEO visionaries find and build their own A-list teams so that they can scale their businesses while they get their life back. And she also trains some of the top level team members for seven-figure CEOs looking to accelerate their team growth. I have personally gotten to connect with Theresa through the mastermind that we are in. She is so brilliant. She's so freaking good at this. And I am just so honored and excited to have this conversation and get to have her share some of her wisdom with you guys. So Theresa, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited too. I love to talk about this because it was a struggle for me. And if I can just give like some little nuggets that will help people on their journey, I'm happy to do it.
Amazing. So I would love for you to kind of fill in, how did you get started in the online space? Because you have such a rich background in so many different areas. So I feel like people should have some context for what they're about to learn as to why you really are the expert in this area.
Okay, sure. So for 9 years, I was the co-executive TV producer for the top organic gardening show on PBS. And the position of co-executive producer is really the wingman or the second in command to the producer. So in our world, that is the integrator. So when the producer has a vision for the show, the co-executive producer makes it happen. And so that was my job for 9 years. And I'm actually have that brain set where I am naturally an integrator, which is a problem for a lot of CEOs who then go on to start their own business, because it's very hard to let go of some of the things that we were always in control of and to let someone else step in and do that role. So I was actually also appearing on the show as the canning and homesteading expert, because it was a organic gardening show. It's growing a greener world. It's still one of the top shows on PBS. And I was appearing on the show and starting my own following. I had a blog, and I realized that a lot of people wanted to learn how to can food. And so I dove into the online space by creating a course on how to can food. And I launched it 4 years ago. And that was when my business just exploded and took off. I actually stepped down from being the co-executive producer and started running my business, Living Homegrown. And I started a podcast and I started teaching other courses, and people started coming out of the woodwork in the organic food and organic gardening space who were authors, who were also bloggers, who wanted to do what I did. So I started teaching people how to start their own businesses, and in the online space, creating courses, basically taking their books and turning them into online courses. But the thing that happened to me, and I know it happens to so many of us, especially people, because we're in the inner circle, we talk to other people who are multi-6, multi-7 internet CEOs, and they all have the same problem in that we start out doing all the things and wearing all the hats in our business, and we're hustling and we're getting started. And that's absolutely how you get started. You have to learn all the pieces and get the ball rolling. Yep. But as our business starts growing, we do none of those things off of our plate. And so that's what happened to me. I was not growing the team alongside my business growing. And you hit this plateau where you can only do so many things. And I was doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing. So I became really obsessed with building a team and finding the right people and learning how to let go and delegate. And I started teaching the people that I was coaching. So this past year in 2018, my team, who I have a stellar team, they ran my business, my online business, Living Homegrown, for the whole year. And I was coaching on the side. Well, it was basically 2 businesses full time. And so my team we have systems and processes. They run everything. I told them who I wanted to interview for my podcast, and I showed up. They did everything else. And I was coaching people on the other end with my coaching practice. And I realized that this piece of team building that I had built and that I was teaching my one-on-ones was really like the missing secret for a lot of people to get from being overwhelmed and stressed to finally scaling their business. So I started coming out of the woodwork and telling people that I was teaching this, and that is how I got out into the world doing this. Is I've been doing it for the last couple of years with my one-on-one clients. And now I do it in group coaching and in programs. And I even have a done with you service where my team and I come in and we analyze what someone has going on, and we help them set up their systems, get the right people in the right seats, and transition from being a solopreneur to being a full entrepreneur so that they can scale.
Yep. And as soon as you shared that you had that service in place, you had a wait list.
Yes.
That was, I don't know, 5-year long wait list, something crazy.
Yes,
I'm sure,
yes.
where everyone was like, pick me, I'm next, add me to your list. I know, I was like, sign me up. I was like, I don't even know if I'm ready for this, but sign me up. I know that I need it.
Yes, I understand that struggle fully. Yeah.
It is real. So for those people who are listening to this and they're maybe not super at the level yet where they are team building, or they haven't really even considered it because they've just been so stuck in the belief system that they have to do it all themselves, that they have to be a solo entrepreneur. I would love for us to just kind of like break down, like, just first and foremost, like, what is an integrator? Because I know this is like some language, some people call it an OBM or a project manager, but in the circles that we run in, we're all like, it's an integrator.
Yes. So the way I explain it to people is it's kind of like your wingman, or it is really an operational manager. So you know how in our business, when we're starting to build up, we are managing the people who are working under us. There's a lot of projects happening, and we have a project. So what an operational manager or integrator or wingman does for you is it lets you step away and just stay in your zone of genius. You stay in the visionary role. You only work on the things that only you can do, and they execute on the vision. So in my TV producer job, we had a vision for the show. I had to run the production team and out on the field to make sure that all the things were happening to make that show come to life. But I wasn't the one creating the vision. The producer was. So it's the same thing in our business. Like, we have a vision of what we want. We want to have our customers have a certain outcome, a certain transformation. We have ideas for how we're going to run launches, and we can map out the plan with our integrator, and the integrator executes on it. It doesn't mean that the integrator is the one doing all the things, because as your team grows, the integrator can have people under them. They're managing the project and making sure everything happens, but they don't have to be like doing, it's not like they step in and they take on all the overwhelm and they're doing all the things. They actually can have people under them, and they're just watching over and making sure everything gets done. All the boxes get checked.
Yes, I love it. So why do people need one now? Because some people say, well, I don't need a team yet, or I'm not there yet, or I don't need an integrator yet. Why do entrepreneurs need one sooner rather than later?
Yeah, there is some resistance to having someone step in, because we're like, the thing that we think in our head is, well, I can just do it faster than I could teach someone else. But it's actually costing you a lot. It's not only costing you money in that you are not spending your time making money, you're spending your time doing the things that someone else could do, but it's also a mental, it uses up your mental space. There is something called decision fatigue. It's a real thing. And when we are trying to be in charge of everything, you've probably experienced this, where if you are working on a project, there's so many decisions that have to be made that by 10 o'clock, you're burnt out. It's very hard to be creative. It's very hard to show up for your classes or workshops that you might be teaching, or showing up for your one-on-one clients if you're so mentally fatigued. So it's using up your time. It's wasting money, because you could be making money instead of doing those tasks. But it also is a mental drain. So the sooner you can get someone in, even if it's just a few hours a week, what I tell people to do is you bring in that person for a few hours a week, and then you use that time for money-making activities so that you can up those hours with that person. You have more money coming in so they can take more off of your plate. So you can start out slow. Doesn't mean you have to hire someone full time right out of the gate. You can yourself up.
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying about the burnout from decision making, that is so real. And that's actually kind of something that I joke around with my significant other, where he's like, well, what do you want to eat for dinner? And I was like, I am done making decisions for the day. He's like, Jen, just tell me what you want to eat. I was like, I can't my brain cannot make another decision, because there are those days, you know,
Yeah.
where it has gotten to that point where the glucose is gone. There's
Yeah.
nothing left.
Yes, and I've experienced that when we were redoing our website. Like, you're making decisions on every color, like move this a quarter of an inch over here, and I thought my head would explode. And you don't realize how tiring that is, but it's a whole different type of way to use your brain. And there's only so much we have every day, so you don't want to waste it. Yeah.
And that's also why some of the top CEOs will wear the same thing every single day, because that's
Yes, or
one
eat the
less
same
decision. Yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, that's not a terrible idea. I may start that soon. Okay, so how does somebody identify if someone is their integrator? Like, what are the key qualities that make somebody great for that role?
That's actually a really, really good question. And I recommend that people start by first assessing themselves, because it can be very individual. And what I mean by that is that we all have a certain way that we tick. We all have a certain way that we approach problems and that we approach our business. And the integrator has to mesh with the way we work, or you're going to clash so much that you really can't make progress. Another thing is that you don't want someone exactly like you, because it's very hard to be a force in nature or a force in your business if you both are thinking exactly the same way. It's actually better if you have someone who has some qualities that are a little bit opposite of you. So what I recommend people do, first of all, is to do core values on themselves. And there's lots of places you can go on the internet to determine what you value most in an employee. But just think of someone you may have worked with in the past, or someone who is your dream in your head of what you would want someone to be, and make a list of what those characteristics are. And that has your core values are in that list. But typically you want someone who's very detailed oriented. You want someone who's responsive and responsible. It's really good if they think outside the box and they're not afraid to step up and try something. One of the tests that I have people is have the person take a DISC test, DISC, and the C is a compliance factor. And that one is very important to look at for an integrator, because if they are super high on compliance, it means that they can be a bit of a perfectionist, which you might think, oh, well, that's not a bad thing. But actually in an integrator, that is a bad thing, because you don't want them to be so afraid of making a mistake that they won't make decisions on your behalf. So if you have someone who's like the perfect person, you think they're the perfect person, and they are super high on C, it doesn't mean that they're like, oh, don't use them as your integrator. It just means you have to know that going in, because you're going to have to give them a lot more reassurance than you would someone else, that it's okay to make a mistake. I want you to make these decisions. And you're going to have to hold their hand a little bit until they get comfortable. Also on the C scale, if they are so low that they're like a integrator, not a rebel, that they're flying off in left field or going off, squirrel, going off in different directions and are not following some protocol. So I recommend that you have someone who's someone in the middle of on the C range. They can be, mid-high or mid-low, but you don't want super high or super low. So I would say that is another thing to look at. But beyond that, what's most important is that they have some of the qualities that you find most important in an employee, like being responsive, being resourceful, being committed, being courageous is another great skill for them to have. But it is very personalized. So I do have the people that I have them work through some worksheets to try and determine and pull out what's most important to them, because what might be most important to me might not be as important to you. But it's very individual.
Totally. I love this. Cool. So this is great. And I love what you're saying. So I had taken the DISC test on a Tony Robbins website. Is that like the main site to take it on, or is there, because I know they will give you a little upsell and try to bring you into like their coaching program afterwards, but their assessment is free. So it is there, which is really nice to have that. And when I took it, it was very eye-opening for me. And it really gave me a lot of clarity on why I had some work conflicts or internal conflicts or things that just weren't feeling aligned. It really gave me a good picture of what was really going on, and it allowed me to step into, okay, how do I want to work with other people and work through my own stuff in a way that it feels more aligned?
Yes. So your question, should you go to the Tony Robbins site? Absolutely. That's actually where I recommend people go because it's free, and you can always just unsubscribe so that Tony isn't sending you a bunch of emails. And actually some of his emails are great, so you may decide you like it. But yes, I tell people to go to just Google Tony Robbins, DISC, so they can find the assessment, get to take it for free, and they'll email you the results. The way I like to describe it, because you've probably talked on your podcast before about Myers-Briggs, that's another assessment that you can do. And Myers-Briggs is kind of like, what kind of car do you drive? And DISC is, how do you drive the car? So in other words, it's almost like, what kind of fuel do you put in the car? Are you really driven? Are you a perfectionist? Or do you have your pedal to the metal the whole time? Or are you very cautious and taking the turns and putting on your turn signals? And so that is the difference between a Myers-Briggs and a DISC. And they're both great for looking at how you might want to, position someone in your business. But each one of those letters is for something different. And the two letters that are important for being a CEO or visionary are the first two, D and I. And that is, are you driven, or how driven are you? And how are you with interpersonal skills? So the I is the interpersonal, and some people might be very persuasive and other people may be more cautious. And looking at that and knowing how you are will help you in finding an integrator. And if they're a little opposite of you, that's a great combo to have. If you're very driven, very high D, and your integrator is very high I, you can make a great team together, because those two letters really, really can help you run your business. So there's a lot to this. I mean, we're just kind of scratching the surface, but the main thing is you can get a lot of insight about the person before you get to the interview stage. Or if it's someone on your team, having them take this test kind of shows you how they tick and how you tick. And you can see where you might have some issues in handing things over to them. And it doesn't mean that they can't do it, but it will help you in guiding them so that they get more confidence in what they're doing.
I'm obsessed with all of the Myers-Briggs and the DISC and using these amazing tools as a way to really identify who that right person is. And I know it's been learning a lot about this over the last year and a half has been really powerful, especially with hiring and finding those right people. So one of the big things within bringing on team members that I've seen happen for myself and so many peers is that they'll bring on independent contractors and then they end up becoming the managers of tasks and actually not really getting a whole lot of time back. So I would love for you to kind of speak to the transition between managing yourself and then actually stepping into that visionary role and leading a team. How does someone make that transition? Like are there steps, or is it just kind of something that you step into?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is mindset, which is right up your alley, but you're absolutely right. We start off bringing on people and we are managing the people, and very, very quickly you can end up managing all the people and not even getting to your work. Yeah. And this is because one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they hand out tasks rather than handing out responsibilities. So you never want it to be that you hand them, like, make this PDF, and then they come back and go, did that, what's next? Is that them coming back, then you spend, and this is the first mistake I made, is you can spend all your time figuring out what their work is going to be for the week. And then as they're coming back, finishing those different tasks, you're dealing with that and you never get to your own work. What you want to create is a self-managed team. And there's a lot of parts to that, but one of the biggest thing is handing out responsibilities. So what I tell people to do is to just pretend like you don't know who may already be on your team. If you already have a team, just come with a blank slate, not thinking where this person is going to go. And instead, come with a blank piece of paper and write down all the different projects that you have in your business. For example, You may have a podcast that has to be managed. You may have launches that have to be managed. You have things like customer service. So you map out all those things and see what are the different projects that you have in your business. And then look at who you have and know, based on what you know about them, if they've already been working for you, or based on their Myers-Briggs and interviews that you've done, where could you place them in this chart? It's kind of like creating an org chart, but it's really called a responsibility chart or an accountability chart. And the reason having this different mindset of, I'm not creating an org chart, I'm creating a responsibility chart, that is really key, because then you're placing someone, like, for instance, if they are your podcast manager, that doesn't mean that you figure out what their tasks are each week. It means that they are in charge, fully in charge, and take ownership of that podcast. And they are responsible not only for it going out the door, but for whatever metrics you decide they need to be working on. If it's more downloads or more exposure on social media, whatever it is that you have for their metrics. And every week, when you have your team meetings, that's what their metrics and what is coming up for them, any roadblocks in producing the show. And you're really no longer in the picture, just giving them task after task. And that mental shift for me was huge. And I started with my podcast because my podcast was award-winning. It was doing super well, but I was so fully into it that even when I handed off bits of it, I was still managing it. So I set up an entire process and I handed that off to someone. And yeah, there was little bumps in the road as they learn it, but they were really committed because of the type of person that they were very committed to taking that on. And now I just show up for the interviews. It's so much easier. And I no longer even have a concern about that. So you can do that with every single process that you have in your business, so that you're no longer handing off tasks. You're now handing off responsibilities, and they are taking full ownership of those responsibilities.
Oh, this is so good. And that is such an essential piece, something that has been a big conversation over the last couple of months. And it just, the team feels more excited when they can take full ownership over a social media platform or a project. They get excited because they can set their own goals, and they feel a little bit more of like that ownership over, wow, I made this happen.
Yes, yes. And the thing is, the other thing that I teach my CEOs is that it's so important that we share our vision with our team. And that's something that a lot of people don't do. They think, oh, they don't care. They just want to do their job. And no, they really want to be part of the overall mission and the vision that you have set. And if we sit down and create our vision for the year, it's imperative that we share that with the team, because that makes them self-managed. If they understand how their project fits into this bigger picture and how their metrics are taking everybody one step closer to what that vision is, they are so much more involved and invested, and they can make decisions for themselves. Instead of saying, should this button be blue or should it be green? They know it doesn't matter, because they understand where what they're working on is fitting into the big picture, and they won't ask all those little questions. They won't worry so much about those type of things, because they understand in the big scheme of things, what matters is their metric. And if they make the button blue and it doesn't work, they can make the decision on themselves to change it to green to see if that bumps up their metrics, because they take ownership of it. But it's up to us to share that with them. There's something that that I shared at the mastermind that really brought this home for me. And it was a speech that Simon Sinek did. And I love Simon. And he talks a lot about leadership. And he was talking about it with people where they would bring a big empty room, and they would tell them that they have to walk in a straight line to that far corner right there. And the person would start walking. They said, you can't turn, you have to just walk in a straight line. The person would start walking, and they would put a chair in front of them. And every single time, the person would walk around the chair and then keep going in the straight line. So they understood where their destination was. They understood the vision. They understood that even though they did have to make some turns, their goal was to get to that corner. When they brought in someone else and they just said, walk in a straight line and don't make any turns, and they didn't tell them where to go, just said, walk in a straight line, the person started walking. If they put a chair in front of them, they would just stop, because all they knew was they were supposed to walk straight, but they didn't have a destination. So they would stop rather than go around the chair. And it happened every single time. And to me, he was talking about how the vision was so important for those people. If they knew that they had to get to the corner, they would take it upon themselves to take those steps around, even though it was not in a straight line, because they knew the most important thing was to get to the corner. And so that's why it's so important that we share our vision with our team, so that they can make those decisions when they get roadblocks put in front of them.
And when you shared that at the mastermind, that was just such a powerful visual to really help sink in, like, why it's so important to have that crystal clear vision, because you want to be able to not only give them the end result, but to kind of piggyback on what you're saying is also handing over that trust to your team. And I think that is probably,
Absolutely.
I'm sure you would agree, like one of the biggest mistakes that people make is trying to micromanage and not trusting their team. And so how does someone, or how do they get to that place where they know that they can trust their team?
Yeah, so trust comes from the team member we get trust. So it's actually a 4-step process for someone to get confidence. And it's the same process that we go through when we are gaining confidence on anything that we want to do. So I'll walk through the 4 steps and what we as a CEO can do to facilitate that, because the person has to get very capable and confident in what they're doing. And when they get to that point, we will have trust in what they're doing. So the very first step of the 4 steps is commitment. And it's very important that our team member be committed to the project or to the responsibility that they're going to be taking on. And it's up to us to sell them on the idea. So what that means for us is that they need to fully understand how the project that they're going to be responsible for fits into the bigger vision. So that's how we sell it to them. So that gets them committed. The next thing that they have to do, the step 2, is that they have to step into courage. And it's just the same as when we are afraid to do something, the first time, we have to step into courage and step out to do it. And they are in the same boat. And I think sometimes we as CEOs forget that they may have never done some of these things before, and they're going to have a little bit of courage to step up and do them. And the way we can facilitate that is to, first of all, give them a little bit of a push, but secondly, to let them know that it's okay if they make a mistake. We don't want them to be so afraid that they won't step out, or they come back and ask a ton of questions, and that's not helpful to us. So we want them to step into courage and actually take the steps to do it. The third phase of getting to where they have confidence is to step into the capability. So once they start doing the thing, they will suddenly realize that they're starting to become more and more capable. And the way we help with that is by making sure that they have tools and resources, or maybe they need training if they're stepping into something that's completely foreign to them, so that they can become more and more capable. Once they reach that stage, they become confident, and we become very trusting in what they're doing. But the way we can even facilitate that confidence even more is to give them praise for what they've done. And that's another piece that so many CEOs forget about. When someone's working for you, they want to feel respected. They want to feel part of the team, part of the community. They also they want to know that what they're doing is contributing. And if they're doing all the things and they're rocking it and we never say good job, they're not going to be with us very long. So it's really important that we recognize them when they do rock it out of the park and give them lots of praise, so that the cycle can start again when they're starting something else that they've never done, to the next thing that they're going to learn. And so it's really exciting because the team is growing. We are growing as a CEO, and that's all we have to do is facilitate the environment for that to happen. And we can have a stellar team growing right alongside of us.
This is so I love how you just broke this down in such a simple way. And it really does create those easy stages and areas that as CEOs we can look at and really identify where we maybe are falling a little bit short and we're not showing up as the best possible leader. So this is so fantastic. And what you were saying, and what you were saying earlier about how you've really handed off your homegrown business to your team to run pretty much independently, I think that is so incredible. And I think probably a part of it is really this idea of having a business that is process dependent versus being solely people dependent. And so I would love for you to just talk a little bit about that distinction and why that is so powerful when scaling.
Yes, and every business is a little bit different. But what I tell my CEOs to do is to imagine that they are preparing for a major vacation where they will be shut off from the world and they may not have cell service and their team may not be able to get a hold of them. If they were to plan for that, what do they need in place so that the team can run without them? Mm. And if you do that, they will run without you and you only need to be there for minimal input. And so what that looks like is having systems, having processes, having the team working together. Like, for example, on my podcast, there's a whole process that I bring on cookbook authors that we interview. And there's a whole process that we have to go through to get permission from the publisher. And we create recipes. If they mention a recipe, there's a download that goes with that. There's a whole process that goes with that, but it's all documented. And my team documented it from me recording myself doing it one time. So I did it once, recorded it, they created the processes, and then we've made sure that everyone on the team has run through it. So if someone who normally does it is out sick, anyone can step in and make sure. And so if you are planning everything as if you will be gone for temporarily, but unavailable, and you think about that, like what would they need to know? How would they be able to handle this or handle that? And you set yourself up for that. And it's not, it's not instantaneous. It takes a little bit of time. But once you do that, holy cow, it just opens up your world and you can take vacation and you can take time off and someone can be sick and the whole world doesn't fall apart. So it's very, very different than if you are the only one that knows how to do something. I mean, think about that. You could get sick. You could have a family emergency and you have to step out. You don't want to be the only one that knows how to do something in your business. You really want to have processes and systems in place.
This is such a powerful mindset shift for so many people who are in that space where they've been growing their businesses by themselves and they are kind of hustling as that solo entrepreneur. So is there a certain belief or maybe a few beliefs that you've been able to develop yourself or help some of these seven-figure CEOs develop that have allowed them to really step into this new leadership role and in this new space in their business?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good question. I think there's a couple pieces to it. But what's most important is if we've truly taken the time to map out our vision, we simply cannot do it alone, and we shouldn't be doing it alone. It can actually be so much more fun to have a team going along with you. And there's times in your business where, things get rocky, but you're not alone at your computer, alone in your room trying to figure it all out. You have a team behind you who will help you brainstorm and will step up and help you overcome some of those things. So you're no longer all by yourself. So I think to me, what's most important is that you're working towards your vision and you're doing it as a team. It's bigger than yourself now. It's not just you against the world. It's you and the team fighting for something that can make a real impact on other people. And that when you get to that point, that's really the third stage of what I think. Like, I feel like people started as a beginner, building their business, and then they go into scaling. And when they get to the stage where they have a team and an integrator or wingman or whatever you want to call it, that's when they start having impact. So it's about thinking bigger and having a bigger vision for yourself. And the sooner you can start setting that up, the faster you get to that impact stage.
Oh, I love this. And it sounds like from that, a belief that maybe in there is, I can't do it alone. And I know even for myself,
Exactly.
that's been an interesting belief to allow in. And there has been some resistance to allowing other people in, because for so many of us, when we first start, we see our businesses as our baby.
Yes.
And if we have that level of attachment to it, where it's so much a part of your identity, it can be really challenging to be open to the idea of outsourcing or team building or allowing somebody else to run the day-to-day without you. So I think that's such a good one. Like, I can't do this alone. In order to make that next level impact, I need a team.
Yes. And part of that is our ego, right?
Yeah.
Because we think, well, no one can do it as good as we can. Well, as much as I am an integrator mindset person, like that's the way I normally tick, my integrator has come in and made changes to our processes and set things up where I'm like, I never thought of that, right? She sees it from a different viewpoint, and she's actually been making it better and I thought it was so stellar, my own ego, and like, this is the most stellar process ever. And she's like, well, have you thought about doing this? And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, I realized I'm not the best at every single thing. You can't be. So having other input and other creative ideas and building that together, it just makes everything that you do so much better.
Yes. And you cannot be the best, nor do you need to be the best at everything. I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, they feel the overwhelm early on in entrepreneurship, that they have to learn and do and be all the things. And if you guys got nothing else from today's episode, which would be crazy if you didn't, but if you have nothing else, please take away that you don't need to be and do all the things.
No, absolutely.
Start there.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love to hear from you. Are there any like big mistakes that you're seeing people make right now that are really stopping them or creating that resistance so that they're not able to get to that next level?
Oh, yeah. So I think one of the biggest ones that I see people make when they first start is that they are hiring people based on their skills rather than on their characteristics. And in our space, the tools are always changing. The things that we're using to make our business work can change in an instant. And so people will get hung up on going out and looking for like the perfect person who knows exactly how to do the WordPress for my blog. And really, that's not the most important thing you should be looking at. You need to look at the characteristics like we talked about at the beginning. So hire someone who has the characteristics of an A-list team player, someone that you can tell is going to work on something that's bigger than themselves, rather than the person who has 20 years experience doing that one thing, because tomorrow that tool could change and that person won't be able to fit into the next role. So I think that's probably the most important. I think that handing out tasks instead of responsibilities is another one. Another mistake that people make is that they don't slow down long enough to get the team and their systems in place. It's kind of like they're bicycling along and their pedals going as fast as they can. And they tell me, I can't stop long enough to set up my system. But if they stop and get off that bicycle and hop into the race car that's sitting right there with the team, they can take off so much faster. But it's where we're thinking, I got to keep bicycling. I can't stop, right? And you have to stop, even if it's just to record yourself and hand it off to someone. So that's the other mistake that I think, and letting go of control. For me, that was one of my Achilles heel, is I didn't want to let go of control because I had this in my head, this ego thing in my head that I do it best. So I can't possibly hand it off because I know I could just do it better. And it comes to the point where you can't do everything. So you have to let go of that control.
Yeah. Where are the best places to find great people?
It's going to be funny that where I learned to find the best people is from our mentor, James Wedmore.
Yeah.
And that is on Craigslist. And people are always like, what? But that is how I hired everyone but one of my best people on my team. And that it gives you a place where you have a large pool of people, and they are not necessarily, they don't understand our world. So I start by hiring them as an assistant, and then I have them work into the position that works best for them.
Mm. And what's great about that, because I know James always talks about that, what's great about it is you don't end up hiring people who just want to pick your brain, steal your systems, and go and run their own thing. And I recently put out an ad for that, and I had some qualifying questions on there, and it was really, I got some great people, but it was also really interesting to see, you could quickly identify the people that, it was nothing personal against them, but, they were not going to be long-term people because they were looking to also build their own businesses. And it was just like, this is probably not the right fit if that's what your outcome is from this.
Exactly. Yeah. My integrator was, she came from working as a school counselor at a middle school, and she'd been doing that for 10 years. And she went through the interview process. I interviewed her several times. And one thing that really resonated with me was if she can handle she could handle anything. And she's very good at being able to handle things because she was a school counselor. So she knows how to handle people.
Wow. That's freaking awesome. It's like the people you least expect it. They don't necessarily need online experience.
No.
They just need the right qualities. Like it's all figure outable. You can teach the steps. You can buy your team courses and programs to get them up to speed, and you don't need to be the expert in everything. This was so freaking amazing. I'm so excited for people to hear this episode and just start putting some of these pieces in place. Where can people go and learn more about you?
So the best place I could send them is to go to my website, teamuproadmap.com. And there is a free assessment where they can see, are they ready just to hire a team member, or are they ready for a higher level, like integrator type person? And they can self-assess themselves and see where they might need to get somebody in their business.
Oh, I love that. That's so cool. I'm going to go do it right now. Even though I'm like, I want to see what this is about. So I will link that up for you guys so you can go and check that out. Theresa, do you have any last words of wisdom?
Yes. I would say my last words of wisdom is, if you're thinking, well, I don't have the money or I don't have the time to hire a team member, you can really start out with just a few hours a week. And those few hours, when you get them back,
Yep.
you use that time to make money. And then you can turn that money back around and get more hours. And you can start out very slowly. It doesn't mean you have to hire someone on full time. So you can do this step by step, bit by bit, but absolutely you need help. And don't try to do it alone. You're just going to make yourself burnt out and crazy tired, and you won't be able to serve your customers the way you want. So you definitely just need some help.
Oh, just brilliant. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of this freaking wisdom, because man, oh man, this is something that, listen guys, like this was a huge hurdle for me. And I've learned a ton from Theresa and from our mentor, James, and from the other people in the inner circle. And I'm just like so grateful, because I know my business would not be where it is today and would not be on track to go, like I would not even be in the same state. Like, you know what I mean? Like it would be on a different train, different track, in a different country if I didn't have the support from all of you guys and from, so many of the things that you've shared as well. So I'm just so indebted to you. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
This is so fun. I can't wait for people to go and connect with you. Guys, if you loved this episode, take a screenshot of the show and tag us on your Instagram stories at HeyJenCasey and at Theresa Lowe, and I'll link all of that up for you so that we can continue the conversation over there and just chat a little bit more about what were some of your biggest aha moments, what were some of your biggest takeaways from today's episode. So thank you guys so much for being here, for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you soon.